Florida's unique geography, with its peninsula shape, hot climate, and flat landscapes, make it stand out among U.S. states. While these features have spurred urban growth, northern Florida remains sparsely populated with only 18% of the state's residents. So why is northern Florida so empty? Florida's story began long before it became the vacation hotspot we know today. In fact, it has one of the longest histories of European exploration in the entire United States. Before the arrival of Europeans, Florida was home to numerous indigenous tribes, including the Timucua, Apalachee, and Cayusa. These native peoples had thrived in the region for thousands of years, adapting to its unique climate and geography. But their world was about to change dramatically. Imagine discovering a land full of promise, only to face an unexpected threat. In 1513, Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de Leon landed on Florida's east coast. Legend has it he was searching for the mythical Fountain of Youth. While he didn't find eternal life, he stumbled upon a land that would become a point of contention between European powers for centuries to come. Ponce de Leon named the land La Florida, in honor of Spain's Easter celebration, Pascua Florida. But the road from the Spanish colony to the American state was long and winding. The Spanish were the first to establish a permanent European settlement in what is now the United States, founding St. Augustine in 1565. This charming city in northeastern Florida still stands today, proudly bearing the title of the country's oldest continuously inhabited European established settlement. But what kept this settlement standing against all odds? Life in early Florida was far from easy. The Spanish settlers faced resistance from indigenous populations, competition from other European powers like France and Britain, and perhaps, most challengingly, Florida's extreme weather. Hurricanes, those monstrous storms that still plague Florida today, were a constant threat to early settlements. In 1559, a massive hurricane struck a Spanish colonization fleet and a newly established colony at Pensacola, leading to the abandonment of the settlement and destruction of the fleet. Talk about a rough start. Despite these setbacks, the Spanish persisted. They adapted their building techniques and agricultural practices to suit Florida's unique climate and geography, but their hold on the territory was far from secure. The early 19th century brought significant changes to Florida. In 1821, Spain, struggling to maintain its far-flung empire, ceded the territory to the United States through the Adams-Onis Treaty. This marked the beginning of Florida's journey towards statehood. However, even as Florida joined the United States, its unique geography continued to shape its development in ways that would have long-lasting effects on its population distribution. And by that, my friends, is where our story gets really interesting. If you've ever looked at a map of the United States, Florida stands out like a thumb. Or perhaps, more accurately, like a long, skinny peninsula jutting into the sea. Florida extends approximately 500 miles from north to south and around 460 miles from east to west at its widest point. But despite its considerable size, Florida is predominantly low-lying. In fact, the highest point in the entire state is only 345 feet above sea level, a hill aptly named Britton Hill, located in the Florida Panhandle. This low elevation is crucial in understanding Florida's geography and population distribution. But before we get into that, let's talk about Florida's coastline. At about 1,350 miles, it's the longest coastline in the contiguous United States. When considering all 50 states, only Alaska, with its numerous islands, has a longer coastline. Florida's extensive coastline is divided into two distinct regions, the Atlantic Coastal Plain and the Gulf Coastal Plain. The Atlantic side features sandy beaches, barrier islands, and dunes that are continually shaped by ocean currents, waves, and tides. On the western side, the Gulf Coastal Plain is marked by its broad, shallow continental shelf extending far into the Gulf of Mexico. This area is characterized by marshes, wetlands, and extensive mangrove forests that thrive in brackish waters where fresh water from rivers meets the salty sea. Now, you might be wondering, what does all this geography have to do with where people live in Florida? Well, it turns out Everything. Florida's climate is primarily humid subtropical in the north and central parts, transitioning to tropical in the southern regions. The presence of both the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico plays a significant role in moderating temperatures, resulting in mild winters and hot, humid summers. These large bodies of water also contribute to the state's high humidity and frequent thunderstorms, particularly during summer. But there's a catch to all this wonderful weather. Hurricanes. Florida's geographic position makes it particularly vulnerable to these powerful storms. The warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean serve as breeding grounds for hurricanes, which can cause significant damage when they make landfall. Florida's long coastline and low elevation make it especially susceptible to storm surges, flooding, and wind damage. This vulnerability to extreme weather events has significantly impacted where people choose to live and build in Florida. While the allure of beachfront property is strong, the risks associated with coastal living have led to the development of stringent building codes and insurance requirements, particularly in southern Florida. There's another fascinating aspect of Florida's geography that's literally hidden beneath the surface. It's limestone bedrock. Much of the state sits on a foundation of limestone, which has given rise to a landscape dotted with sinkholes, springs, and underground rivers. These karst features are formed by the dissolution of limestone by acidic water, creating a complex network of caverns and aquifers. The Floridan Aquifer, one of the most productive in the world, provides drinking water to millions of residents and supports agricultural irrigation across the state. However, this same geological feature that provides abundant fresh water also creates challenges for construction and development, particularly in northern Florida, where the limestone is closer to the surface. But you might be thinking, okay, Florida has some unique features, but why does that lead to more people living in the south than the north? Well, the population distribution of Florida is heavily skewed towards the southern half of the state, with the northern portion, particularly the Panhandle, being less populated. And as usual, several geographic, economic, and historic factors have combined to contribute to this disparity. Let's start with the Panhandle. This narrow strip of land extending along the Gulf Coast is characterized by a landscape dominated by swamps, mangroves, and wetlands. Unlike the sandy beaches that attract millions of tourists and residents in the southern part of the state, the Panhandle's coastline is less inviting for large-scale development and tourism. The marshy and wetland areas, while ecologically very important, do not offer the same recreational opportunities as the beaches of southern Florida. Another factor limiting population growth in the Panhandle is the lack of natural harbors and major navigable rivers. Unlike other parts of Florida, where ports and waterways facilitate trade and transportation, such as the major ports in Miami and Tampa, the Panhandle doesn't have significant maritime infrastructure. This limitation historically hindered economic development and reduced the region's attractiveness to settlers and businesses. In contrast, southern Florida has benefited greatly from its natural harbors and extensive network of navigable waterways. Places like Tampa Bay and Charlotte Harbor in western Florida and the Miami River connecting to the Port of Miami have fostered robust trade and tourism industries. These features have contributed significantly to the region's economic dynamism and population growth. The presence of these economic drivers has led to the development of major metropolitan areas such as Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, Tampa, St. Petersburg, and Cape Coral. These cities continue to attract residents from across the country and around the world, fueling further growth and development. Let's break down some numbers to really understand the population distribution. The Miami metropolitan area leads the pack with about 6.1 million people, making it the 8th largest metro region in the United States. This is followed by Tampa with 3.2 million, Orlando with 2.7 million, and then Jacksonville with 1.6 million people. In the Panhandle, Pensacola is the largest metro area with about 510,000 people, followed by the state capital, Tallahassee, with 309,000 people. To learn more about Florida's history, check out the video, Why Did Spain Give Florida to the U.S. Basically for Free?